may not be feeling happy at the moment, but sometimes we have to go through pain before we get to that joy. And I think about giving birth. I had to go through pain before I had that happiness and had my child, right? I can't
Oh,
skip
wow.
the pain and automatically have my baby. I have to go through the pain in order to get to the other side. So sometimes in life we have we have a journey and hurdles we have to get over, but it's going through the pain that we get to the other side of happiness and joy.
Okay. Look, I'm going to take it just a minute and reset that right quick. I just see our audience is just getting back, and I don't think that they heard the question. So I'm just going to restate that question for our audience as they are coming back. When we just lost the feed there, I don't think they got all back yet. So for those of you that are just joining us back, thank you. Welcome back. We're sorry that we had something happen. We're not even sure what went on with that, but it looks like we lost the feed for a quick moment there. But we're talking about families and making it through the crisis and happiness in the crisis. And the question that we just posed to our guest was this, and particularly to the ladies on our team. And there's a reason why I'm asking the ladies, and I'll reveal that in just a moment. And that is this, that how important or significant is happiness when you're in crisis? Oftentimes when people are going through crisis, sometimes happiness is the last thing on the last box you want to tick. I want to survive the crisis. That usually rates way high at the top. I don't care about being happy. I just want to survive when I get through this. And yet there are other people and that in the midst of crisis, they're pursuing some stuff. They're whistling while they work. They're, trying to do things to make sure that the happiness and contentment survives. To the ladies, I just want to ask that question again. How important is it to you for you to stay happy, for you to keep your family happy when you're in the midst of a crisis?
I mean, I was going to say, I think you want to keep your family happy, but I think with as a woman, if you don't if it's not reciprocated, or if you're not feeling that happiness and that joy, you get weary, you get frustrated, and it's like you're just on autopilot, and I don't think that's healthy. For us as women, you want to feel that sense of appreciation, and so if you're giving, you want to receive. And I know it might sound quite selfish, but in order for a woman to be really happy, like you can function on autopilot for a certain amount of time, but after a while the frustration sets in, and then you start to dwell on those negative thoughts. So I think you need to, happiness is important for you to stay positive.
Good. Good.
Yeah. And as I had stated earlier, I believe that when we go through crisis, especially as a family, it is a tough time. It's difficult. And most people are not happy while they're going through a crisis. It's hard. And it's okay to, name your emotions. I'm disappointed, or I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm going through this. That's natural and that's normal. I think during those times, we need to take time for self-care. We need to do whatever the crisis might be, a loss of a job, a fire, losing your home through a fire, dealing with a sick child. It's hard. It's tough. However, as I stated earlier, that sometimes in life we have to go through that journey. We have to go through that pain to get to the other side of happiness. And that makes me think of when I had my children. It was painful. It was hard. However, I had to go through that pain in order to be able to be happy, to have my children in my arms. So in life, sometimes it's a journey, and we have to recognize there's highs and there's lows, but we have to be willing to be committed to push through it as a family. And that's how we can get through a crisis.
Barbara, does it seem to be
I was.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Angela. Yes.
No, I was just going to reiterate what I had said earlier as well about having emotional regulation, or managing your emotions through crisis, because I think that we can get so caught up in the crisis and forget to regulate our emotions throughout that time. And one way that I found that I do that is maybe going out and maybe do some gardening or some exercise in order to reduce that feeling of tension or stress when in a crisis. So I think it's really important that we're able to do that in order to find our feet. Or for some of us, it's prayer as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Barbara.
I was just thinking, actually, and I just want to be real with you all. And I think it's important that sometimes we are real, because I do like and hear the buzzwords self-care, etc., etc. They're buzzwords. They're fairly new to a lot of people. But let me just throw a spanner in the works, because I would say to God, I am so unhappy. Things need to change. If there's a crisis in my in my family, I would say to him, I'm really unhappy. What are you going to do about this? And I would pray and pray, and I won't go for a walk. I won't go to the garden. I'd sit and wallow. And that's being real, because that's how it is sometimes.
Wow.
You can't shift from that position of being unhappy. And you might not say to your husband, I'm unhappy. You might not say to your family members in your household, I'm unhappy. But you just put that smile on your face and you just carry on in unhappiness. So I want people I want people to know that actually this is a real thing. This is real. We can say we can do this, that, and the other, but in reality, it's not like that for a lot of people. And I would confess, I would say to God, I'm unhappy. I can't do this anymore. You've got to sort this out.
Wow.
I'd cry to him in the privacy of my own bedroom. No one will know that I'm crying. So yeah, it's a difficult one, but yes, I guess if you have a relationship with God, you can say, God, help me through this and tell me what I need to do. All right, let's go out for lunch. Let's do this. And then you think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. The sun's shining. Let's go for a ride. And, it kind of takes your mind off what's actually happening at the time.
Yeah.
So I don't want anyone to feel that you can't say that I am unhappy, because that's the reality of life. There are a lot of people that are very, very unhappy. Even Christians, lots of Christians, people that have a faith and believe in God. So that's me saying how real it is sometimes to say how unhappy you are.
And saying that it's important to know that what God listens out for, the rawness, in terms of the rawness of your feelings, how real it is. I think in my opinion, he looks for the authentic feeling. The authentic feeling is a feeling that is real, that calls the situation its name. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. This is my story that has affected me and made me feel this way. This is my feeling. This is what I'm feeling. And so he looks out for the realness, the authentic feeling. And when we do that, we feel a kind of a reliance on God when we empty ourselves of what we're feeling, whether it's a bad feeling or good feeling, emptying out everything on Him.
And it's getting it out there, because when you get it out there, I'll tell you what, you feel much at ease with yourself, because you've told God. You've cried out and you've told Him. But
it's also good to tell your spouse as well.
I was going to say that, actually, because I was going to say just to carry on from that point as well. Like, I think as women, we want to be able to tell our spouse and feel like we're being heard as well. And and we talk about this all the time about how we might express how we're feeling, and then my spouse might want to try and fix my problem. But actually, sometimes we just want to be heard. We just want to say it, because I think there's a certain level of, relief that just comes from being able to just offload and say those words, and for someone to just, maybe just hear you and empathize with you and just appreciate what you're saying without necessarily giving a solution, but just to that thing that you can just, the ability to just say what is on your heart will help you to help to bring you a bit more joy, I think, as well, or to help you to resolve those feelings of dissatisfaction or unhappiness. So just that being, and I know with God, I know that God will hear me when I cry, but it's also good to know that in my relationship, in my family, when I speak, someone is listening to me and hearing what I have to say.
Wow. This
and I
is
guess
good
that's
stuff.
if you've got a spouse, because some people don't have a spouse, but yeah.
Sure. Listen, I
Pastor
know
Wade,
Pastor Wade has
Yes.
something he wants to share, and I think he's still on that 7-second delay or so. So, Dr.
Okay.
Wade, you can start speaking right now as I finish this up, and we're going to hear you when you start talking. If you start when I said go now.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear me at this moment, but listen, you pointed out about crisis. We're talking about the family, crisis in the family. So the question is, when you're going through a crisis and you're part of a family, should you work through the crisis as a family or work through the crisis individually to get back in sync?
I think it would depend on what the crisis is, to be fair, because
Okay.
sometimes it's not appropriate to tell your family what the crisis is, especially if you've got young children or even teenagers, because I don't know if you know, well, I'm sure you do know that at the moment teenagers are in crisis themselves with the mental health issue. Well, in England, it's huge, absolutely huge. And for me, personally, if that way, with his own issues that he's got going on, but I would want him to come and tell me about his situation because I'm his mother. So I just really I think it depends on what the crisis is, because sometimes you can't always let your family know what it is, and you have to work through it by yourself. And there are other times when you can sit down together as a family and work it through. So I really do think it depends.
I think the definition of a crisis would really, at least for me, help me to really put a perspective on this question, because what is a crisis? Is a crisis just a problem? Or is it more than that?
A crisis to me is more than a problem. It's like something that's like, it could be a matter of life and death.
Miss Barbara, if I could just interrupt you for just a second. Your husband is looking so nice and handsome today in that pretty blue shirt that matches my blazer. But when you're talking, we're only seeing like half of your face. Could you? Yeah, there we go. Yeah. We want to see that. There we go. All right. I was going to say get closer. There, right? He moved the camera. He said no. All right. Good. Thank you. Go ahead, Miss Barbara.
No, I was just saying that to me, a crisis seems more than a problem. It seems like extremely serious. And sometimes, like I said before, a crisis you can't always tell your family members to help work through the crisis, because it would depend on the age of the child or the children. I think so. It's something that's bigger than a problem, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What I wanted to say, though, Dion, before you ask for a definition of the word crisis, is that I think somebody was talking about, I think it was Nosy, talking about sharing your feelings. What I've discovered in my experience working with some African Caribbean couples is that most male couples struggle to appreciate feelings. Most of them struggle to appreciate feelings, either because
just a clarification: most male couples or most males in the couple
in the relationship.
In the relationship.
Well, I'm talking about the male in a relationship, married couples.
Okay, got it. Okay,
yeah.
Just wanted to clarify.
And I'm referring to those, not all of them, some of them, African Caribbean couples, the male couples. Yeah. Perhaps you can say for everybody, but my experience is that few of them struggle to experience or to say what they're feeling and to appreciate what other people are feeling, either because they themselves, when they were children or in the early childhood experiences, they were not, or they did not experience, or did not have the opportunity to share or their feelings, or to say what they're feeling, or to name what we're feeling. Perhaps the caregiver or whoever raised them did not share with them or give them the opportunity to say what they're feeling, or to name the feeling if they were sad, to say why they were sad. Perhaps they would say to them, be quiet. You don't need to be sad. Why are you sad? Why are you angry? Why are you upset? Rather, couples from the African and Caribbean background, in my experience, some of them struggle to identify or to share feelings or to appreciate other people's feelings. And it could be maybe they themselves did not experience or have the opportunity to share their own feelings, so they struggle with it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think a family crisis, and I'm just going by the word family, that the whole family is involved in this crisis. So if the whole family is involved in the crisis, together as a team, I think the family together needs to come and try to figure out how to resolve the issue at hand. And I agree. I think that families should provide the opportunity to have a safe place to share emotions. So if they're feeling, if someone says they're hungry, I can't say you're not hungry. I don't know how you feel. I just need to accept that that's your feeling, right? And understand that they're sharing their feeling, and empathize or sympathize or just acknowledge their feelings. So we can create a safe environment in our homes that might be helpful in navigating through a crisis as we share our emotions with one another.
I just want to say that I've worked with a young person very recently who came to me because she had attempted to take her own life. And during the work that we've done together, I eventually invited her parents to come and see me. And for them, they didn't know how to support their daughter and wasn't getting any support within the local community to support their daughter through a crisis. And they were so grateful to me for including them in the restoration, if you like, of their daughter by enabling them with information, not necessarily what the child has told me, but more to do with what might be under the umbrella of suicide or self-harming. And this was very helpful to them. And since that time that we've been working together, she's been able to express herself more, because one of the things about that was that she was alone, but she's expressing herself to her parents, and they are now talking as a family about things that they never talked about. So it was like all of them in the family, but they just weren't talking to each other. And I think it's really important that families can go through something together rather than in isolation.
Yeah, this is a great segue and a great point. We've been talking about the whole program. If you've just joined us today, this is a special Friday edition of Pastors Roundtable. We have some special guests joining us from across the pond, all the way in England, and we are just excited to have them with us. But we've been talking about commitment through the crisis. And up to this point, we've been talking not so much about commitment, but we've been talking about happiness. What I'd like to do in the next few minutes is to bridge that gap between happiness and commitment. Is there an impact that happiness has on commitment? We see families, when we look at the data, Dr. Henry, I know this is your ballpark. When we look and Sister Henry as well, that when families break up. It's usually they come apart when there is something that it's a financial issue, it's a communication issue, it's a extramarital issue. Those are those big issues that tend to break families apart, or that relinquish at least one partner's commitment to the relationship. Some crisis comes, and so they feel that they can no longer be committed to trying to make this thing work. What role does happiness play? And this is probably one of the obvious questions, but just talk about it for a minute. What role does happiness play in an individual's desire to remain committed to the relationship? This is akin to the earlier question that I asked. Do I have to be happy to stay committed? And what role does happiness play in staying committed to the relationship, especially in a time of crisis?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I want to say, there's a couple here greater than me, and that's all these individuals from the UK. So I definitely want to say that. One of the things when myself and Dr. Lawrence were in school together, and we had some wonderful classes, we dealt a little bit with, I don't know if you remember, I know you remember Renee Drum's class. You remember that class? Yes. And class, she had us read a book called Family Society. It's an excellent book. And in that book, they give you the makeup of a strong family, what constitutes a strong family. Commitment is high. With the area of happiness, and again, as I look at happiness, based on, just a few things that experienced, read, and some of the wonderful answers that were given here. This state of well-being, that's really where I'm at when we talk about happiness. So if you have a state of well-being, meaning doesn't mean that you can't get sad, because you will get sad. That is a normal human attribute, right? But if you have that ability to say, you know what, I'm going to endure, you base your well-being definitely on principles, the principles of commitment, being committed. I think that's the relationship. The relationship is a state of well-being. That means you can get sad, of course. You have to express your emotions. Sometimes you're angry. That's okay as well. But because you have that foundation, those principles, those values, I think that keeps you committed. And especially when you go through a crisis, and I like some of the definitions here, going through a crisis, that intense, I think somebody gave it here, the intense, a time of intense difficulty, trouble. When you're going through a crisis, you got to have that, you got to be grounded so that you will be able to make it through. And that well-being, that state of well-being, that building your self-worth in God, right? Feeling accepted in God, that well-being, that I believe helps you to make it through the crisis, because those values help you to be committed. And I think that's the relationship as I see it.
I had just left a funeral. My wife and I, we were in a grocery store. A lady walked up to me. She recognized me from the funeral. She just came over to say hello. And I thought that's what she was just coming to do, was to say hello. 20 minutes later, we were still standing there. She was still talking. She was now, and I had never met her before. But now she was into all of her family life, and she was talking about how God had been working with her marriage and her husband that she was still married to, but how after years of abuse and all kind of things that were going on, she said one day she got a call from her husband. He worked offshore in the boats offshore, and something had happened to the boat. The boat had turned over. He was out in the ocean. Somehow he still had a phone. He called her, and he was, feeling like he was about to die. She looks me in the eye and she says, "Pastor, I told God in that moment that if he was ever going to answer a prayer, now was a great time, that I could finally be free from this thing." And I'm cringing, because I'm like, yo, she's in the grocery store and she's talking to me, and she's still married married to this guy. She was not happy, but somehow she stayed committed to the relationship, even when she was literally praying to God to take her husband's life, to free her from this marriage of misery. And she had prayed that prayer. And I suspect there are a whole lot of spouses out there who have prayed that prayer. God, find a way that if you do it so I don't have to do it, whatever it is, that thing is going on. And yet somehow there are in both and we look at those things and we kind of chuckle now, but there are often people who stay committed to relationships and marriages that some of us from the outside look at and say, nah, bro, you should have been gone a long time ago. Or yes, sis, you should have bounced, 5 years ago. You should have left that brother at the altar. You should have never, and yet they have managed to stay committed, even when they were not happy. What do we say to situations like that?
And let me just jump in right here and then definitely give the panel a chance to speak on this subject. Now, commitment, again, I'm big on these definitions now, right? Commitment, when I'm reading some of the literature here, it is not only the obligation or, to stay together, but it's more than that. It's a commitment to each other's growth, spiritual growth. And so this word commitment is big. And I think a lot of times we look at a marriage of longevity as a marriage of happiness, which we know that's not the truth.
Mercy. People
could be married for a long time and be like that lady
praying that prayer every single day. That's right.
Lord, answer my prayer, right?
Deliverance.
So again, this commitment, what does it mean to be committed? Committed to the person's not only spiritual growth from our biblical worldview, but also their mental growth, their physical growth. You want the person. Commitment is just a big word. And I think that having a proper perspective on commitment, I think will encourage people to do the work so that they can truly be committed to their family. And we're talking about husband and wife, but also, those children, right? Being committed to them, right? So just want to drop that in there, but I'd like to hear from the rest. And
I just want to say that just to chime in, that it sounds like she was more committed to the marriage, like the title marriage, and not the relationship. So sometimes as Christians, and especially I'd say Seventh-day Adventists, we don't believe in divorce. We try everything possible to keep the marriage together, unless it's for adultery or whatever reason. And so people stay in relationships that are dead. Not that it can't be revived. I'm not against that. I do believe God, if God can raise a dead person and bring him to life, he can definitely raise a dead marriage. Nothing is impossible for God. But I think some people are committed to the word marriage. They don't want to get divorced, but they're not really committed to the relationship. There's no growth. They're not trying to mend the relationship anymore because they think it's dead. So I guess it all depends. Are you into the relationship? Are we trying to work the relationship? Or are we just hanging in there to stay, quote unquote, married?
All right. Good. Anybody else? Want to just in those situations, because we all know that there are plenty of marriages that are out there that are just like that. What do we say to people that are living in those kind of marriages where they feel like they have to stay committed in spite of whether or not they are happy?
I think I'll take
in some cases it's difficult for them to leave. Maybe they have a financial constraint, or maybe it's dangerous to leave. Look at some of those marriages where the husband beats her or something, and then she tries to leave, and before you know it, she's subjected to even more beatings or even killed for that matter. So some people it's really scary to actually leave, or maybe not safe enough to leave, and they have to calculate the best time to leave a relationship where they're not happy in it. There are many couples who I've come across who they're living in the same house, and because of financial difficulties, they're separated. but they're living together.
Okay.
The housemates.
So sorry, I didn't hear you, Nasi.
So they're living as housemates, you know, as opposed to living as a couple, you know. And I think that's the reality of quite a few relationships, that people stay together for the convenience. And I guess it comes down to that. Well, I think first of all, there's the foundation. What was the foundation of your marriage in the first place? What was that? But then I think if you get to a point where you realize that you are in this crisis, where you're no longer kind of singing up from the same hymn sheet anymore, there needs to be a commitment from both parties, I think, to want to do something about it. Yes. But I guess in a lot of relationships, and I think a lot of people that we speak to would say that, well, I want to change, but my spouse doesn't want to change. So it's like, how do we bridge that? So I guess my next question is, how do we bridge that gap? Because, you know, one person wants to change, the other person's not, they're quite happy to just carry on living the way they're living. How do we get that message to each other that, you know what, this is not working. I want to be happy. I want us to be happy as a unit. So I think there needs to be a desire on both parts for change to happen, you know, and then you've got to spend quality time, you know, with each other, you know, you have to maybe be intentional about setting aside time to rebuild the bridges, to find out where things have gone wrong, to find out how you can go forward positively, you know, but it has to be a commitment on both sides, not just on one side, you know. Otherwise you end up with just living for convenience's sake. And then what we see is that it then has an impact on the children, the relationships that the children will go. I think children are very perceptive, and they can see like the disconnect between parents, and they're not learning like good attachments. They're not learning how to communicate well. It's okay not to agree on everything. You know, I agree. You can't agree on everything, but they need to see that, okay, while they can't agree, they can come back to an understanding, you know. Otherwise, the young people then go into like, you know, terrible relationships, and then it just kind of the cycle continues.
Vicious circle.
Yeah, there has to be a willingness for not just for the sake of the children, but for your sakes as well, because, you know, like a lot of people have found the children are going to leave one day, and it's going to be the two of you left together, you know. And I know, I think it was Pastor Dion was talking about, was it grey divorce, where people like are married for such a long time, and then the children leave, and suddenly you look at each other and you don't even recognize the person sitting next to you, you know. So for the sake of yourselves and for your joy and for the longevity of that relationship, there needs to be a willingness for both parties to come together, I think, you know.
So does this make a case to perhaps reword these vows that we traditionally give? Because this is what we do. We have people come and stand before a congregation full of people, stand before a preacher and before God. And the traditional vows say this: do you take this man, do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife? And we say, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. And then we cap it by saying, till death do us part. Doesn't say till happiness, or until I'm happy, or till I no longer have a desire for this commitment. We say it's death, yo. I mean, that's like, there's like no other, that's, you know, that's what people are fighting. So, okay, whether I'm happy or not, I made a vow before God. And I made a vow. And so people they're torn often between, am I going to keep this vow that I made before God? Even though I'm very unhappy and dissatisfied with this marriage, I made a promise. I often will tell people that I'm counseling with marriage that it comes to a point, particularly in marriage, where you have to stop loving people because of who they are. You're dating, you find somebody, you love him because he's tall, dark, and handsome, because he respects you, because he's funny, because he can provide for you, because he's intelligent. You like her because, ooh, she looks good, and she pleases me well. So, you know, all that's where the things that we like them, but we love them. We end up getting to a point where we have to love them, or we have to stop loving them, rather, because of who they are, and love them because of who you are. So I tell you, you've got to love him because of who you are, not because of who he is. Why? Because he's going to change, and he might not always be, but you've got to love them because, and where do we get that from? God doesn't love us because of who we are. He loves us because of who he is. We do mean things, we do dumb things, we do stupid things, we do things that embarrass him, we do things that just, and yet he still loves us, not because of those characteristics. He loves us because of who he is. And so when marriages when people are fighting to stay committed, is this a basis? Is that a good basis for them to begin a reason for them to fight, to maintain the relationship because of these vows that they have taken before God?
And I wanted to say that, you know, in addition to that, God gives us 9 ingredients to help us fight to make it work. And it's in, you know, the ingredients of love, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy. How do you love somebody how do you give somebody who is not lovable? How do you show love to somebody who is not lovable? How do you show joy to somebody who is not joyful, completely miserable? How do you show peace, or have peace with somebody who doesn't have peace with himself or herself? He gives us the Holy Spirit to capacitate us to be able to love beyond measure, to show love, to show compassion, to comfort. Because my comfort, he says, will heal. And so he gives us those ingredients to help us to heal the cracks, to heal the pain, to heal the unlovableness we find, not because of us, but because of him, what he's given to us.
Yeah, I wanted to share too that, you know, we're all sharing some wonderful tools, great skills, you know, great solutions. You know, and we know that it's not easy. So everything that we're saying, you know, the fruit of the Spirit, you know, loving despite how the other person is, being like Christ, it's not easy. It's not easy. No. If it was easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation because everybody would be doing it, right? So I think one of the things that we can try to remember, or at least I try to remember, is to focus in on what's within my control. What can I control? You know, I can't change certain circumstances. Things have happened. I can't change it. I can't go back and rewind the time. You know, I have no control over someone else's behavior, what they say and what they do. All I have control over is how I react, how I respond. And so I kind of look at it like me throwing a pebble in a pond. You know, what I do has a ripple effect. So maybe if, like Dr. Lawrence was saying, I show love, you know, I show compassion, I care, maybe that might have some type of ripple effect on my spouse, right? Because I can't control the other person. But again, everything we're sharing, great. It's wonderful. It's in the word. It's true. It's scholarly. You know, it's not easy though. So I don't want anyone to think that we're acting as if it's so easy. Just be like Jesus. You know, it's not easy.
Manipulate them though. Stop! I'm playing.
I love the concept of the fruits of the Spirit. I, a couple of years ago, put out a little journal about the fruits of the Spirit, in the sense of, I called it fruits of gratitude. And it focuses on the fruits of the Spirit. And I found that although it was written for women, to be used by women as a journal, to write down at least just one thing that you feel grateful for each day, I find that couples are using the journal and are getting mileage out of that by being able to notice what they are grateful for in their spouses. And I think when you're focusing on one of those spirits, or love, joy, peace, for a whole month, it does put the emphasis on it, because they're spending a whole month thinking about, what do I love, or what do I find joy, or how do I find peace in my relationship with my spouse or within myself. And to me, has been very helpful. And so I really like what you said there, Pastor Lawrence, about the fruits of the
I'm not
Spirit.
sure if you could hear me. I'm not sure if you could hear me now, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can hear me now, but one of the things that you have brought out is that one of our viewers brought out the point that it is not happiness that Jesus calls us to, but to joy. And sometimes we tend to mix that up and think the happiness is what we need to achieve, but it is the joy that gets us through. And so, although the question for the day has been about happiness and commitment, and I know our time is coming to an end, but that joy, I mean, what you have spoken about is the fact to feed the joy that we have throughout our lives. But could y'all just give that, just give a hot comment towards this joy that I can gain that will help me to make it through the crisis?
Joy is about finding something that you love to do, or finding joy in Jesus Christ for those who are Christians. But we do have people out there in this world that do not know Christ, and they have to find their joy through something else, whether it's through something they love doing, or just family values, closeness with family. But you find the joy somewhere deep down inside of you, because it becomes part of your nature, part of who you are. So essentially, it's a lived experience, this joy. And for us as Christians, we find joy in Christ, trust in Him.
Good. Well, listen, I appreciate the answers and everything that everybody has contributed to so far. I am looking at our time, and we are just beyond our end mark. This is one of those conversations that can go on and on and on and on, and there's so much to drill into. There's so many families right now, marriages that are in crisis, families that are in crisis, all around. I mean, outside of the church, inside of the church, inside of the ministry, inside of church leadership, in the pews, everywhere we look. There are issues that we know that families are struggling with. And so just as we wrap up this evening, for those of you in the UK, and this afternoon for those of you in the States here, to our guests, and we're going to ask each of you to contribute on this question. If you could come up with one or two things that you think would be some good things that families can do that will help them to stay committed, that true commitment, Dr. Henry, that you mentioned and helped to define. What would be two things? And Angela, you kind of let us off with one of them, that writing some things down there. I think that's powerful. But let's start with the Lawrences and go to the Connors and end with Angela again. What are one or two things that you think can be some takeaway tools for some families just to hang in there and make it work through some crises that they may be facing right now in 2021?
Well, I would go or encourage somebody today for two things, or perhaps three things. Good things in a spouse that they can talk about or be grateful for. So I just want to write down two or three things. Go away, write down two or three things that you're grateful for. I know there are horrible things, bad things, perhaps, the things that you don't like, but just look for 2 or 3 things that you can be grateful for. And say, God, I'm grateful for this particular thing.
That he works away from the house 10 hours a day. Thank you, Jesus.
Not in the pandemic.
I'm
Good.
grateful that he went shopping today and brought home some
Amen.
food.
There you
And
go.
Yes.
I'm grateful that he washed the dishes today and did the cooking today.
Good. Good.
Yes.
Write them down. All
I
right.
think it depends on how far things have gone, but what might be a thought is that couples can renew their vows in the sense that recommitting their lives to each other, and that may help as well.
Good. Good. All right. Nazi, Darren.
That's something practical.
Mm.
And you can do that online as well. I've seen that online.
I would say something along the lines of developing oneself to serve your spouse.
Wow.
You know, it's
That's
not
tough.
easy for some of us to do. But in doing so, we as a couple, you as a couple, whoever it may be,
It's a family.
as a family as well, yes, we'll have that opportunity to grow together, to understand each other more. And also, another point, be humble
Oh, wow.
as individuals. You know, there's always a hierarchical, there was a hierarchical situations in families, etc., where the man supposedly has to, you know, be the head of the home and, you know, enforce everything. But, you know, when it comes to certain aspects well, not certain aspects, all aspects, there's going to be opportunities for each one to take the lead. Don't be disgruntled about it. Be humble, because we're trying to go onto the same path. We're trying to end up in the same place.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I would say just kind of maybe learning to hear each other, you know. I think it's important to say that I don't think it's never too late to try something different, you know. So maybe take time to relearn your spouse, because, you know, we go through like different journeys through life, different experiences. We've been through a crisis. It's going to change the way that we might view things. It might change the way that we feel about things. It might change the way that we work in our roles as a couple, you know. So just taking time to relearn each other, to listen to each other, to empathize with each other, and maybe taking time to work on your relationship. I think we've talked already about the stigma, you know, between about going to counseling. And I remember, in our experience, we've had loads of little retreats where couples will come, and there's always this idea that they're going to sit there and someone's going to, there's going to be all like psychological mind, you know, twisting. But actually, it's taking time to work on your relationship, attending seminars, reading, you know. I think it's never too late to try and learn something new about your spouse, because we're always growing.
Good stuff. So be intentional about finding ways to serve other family members, being humble and being willing to try something new. Good stuff. Good stuff. Angela, what would you add to that? Some things or strategies, things that families can do to stay committed.
I too had written down the idea of just communicating, really taking the time to listen, I think one of the things about communication is sometimes we don't really listen deeply with our eyes, our ears. So I just want to say to listen intently, with intention to hear the other person. And I believe that love conquers all. The scripture says in 1 Peter 4, verse 8, above all, love each other. And it covers a multitude of sins. So it covers multitude of wrongs, if you like.
Amen.
So I think that love rules, and that's what we need to take into our family life, to have compassion for each other and to serve each other, and just let it be the main thing that leads us in our homes. That's my suggestions.
Thank you so much, Angela. Yeah. Dr. Henry, things you guys want to add to that list, some takeaways in the midst of crisis, just a couple of things, one or two things that some families can do to find ways to constructively be committed to the crisis.
I agree with everyone, and I like this tool or technique that I usually suggest to my clients to practice. It's called the GLAD technique. And so I think if you're searching for a way to be committed again, or to find that joy, which is probably the real word we should have been using besides happiness. We know happiness is fleeting. It's triggered by external things, but we're really talking about that internal joy that only God can give, that peace. I think we could try the GLAD technique. G stands for gratitude, grateful. So maybe we can start searching for things that we're grateful about in our family or in our spouse, our children. Every day, find something new that I'm grateful for. L stands for learn. What did I learn that was new about my spouse? Or what did I learn that was new about my children? Seek for that every day. Look for something to learn, something new about someone in your family. A stands for accomplish. What did I accomplish today? What did they accomplish today? What did we accomplish as a family today or in our relationship? And D stands for delight. What delighted me? What made me smile? What made me feel happy or feel good today in my marriage? Or what did I do? Or what did he do? So find a way to go on that scavenger hunt every day in your life with your spouse. Even if you're doing that personally, the GLAD technique. Gratitude, learn, accomplish, and delight. That's a technique we can probably use that can help us.
Love it. Good stuff. Wow.
Definitely. And I just have one thing to add. Again, great ideas, great suggestions, strategies. Having a family vision. Having a family vision. When you have a family vision and you're invested into that vision, that can help you through the tough times of life. It can help you when you see that your children or your spouse are suffering, because you're invested in that preferable future. It will motivate you and encourage you so that you can be there for one another. So that family vision, I think, is awesome and all important. And listen, I just want to say this. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. And again, we, experienced a little technical difficulties. And again, I thank Pastor Paul for bringing us all on. So I just want to say that again. But we need to do this again. We got to do this again. And if you're willing, we're going to do it right.
Yeah,
we'll get
let's go for it.
Let's do it, man. And I think that this type of conversation will definitely help us.
Thank you for having us.
Right. And I do want to say something also before we go up, because I think right now it's like 9:50 for you, right? Am I right? It's about 9:50? Okay, so all right. So we're going to get off quickly. But here's the thing. I do want to say something is happening next week. Nazi, can you share with us, and Darren, can you share with us what's happening next week?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So next Saturday, from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on exactly the same platform, on the SEC media platform, we're going to be and on Zoom, actually. So the details are out there, and we'll send them out again. we're going to be revisiting this topic, commitment through the crisis. And we're going to be joined by Dr. Dion and Dylan. And we're going to be talking in a slightly more intimate setting with a lot more people. Just how do we navigate through these times of crisis? So you'll be able to log in on Zoom if you want to take part in the conversation. You can watch on YouTube and comment on YouTube as well, and we'll pick up your comments and ask some of those difficult questions. There are loads of questions that come up like time and time again, about relationships and how do we navigate when there has been a breakdown in communication, when we have financial problems. So all of those questions, we'll be touching on all of those aspects in that 3-hour session. We're going to have a breakout room as well, where the men can talk and the women can talk, because we do things slightly differently, but that's okay. And then we'll come back together again and we'll share a bit more together. So you don't want to miss that. It's going to be really good. We'll have Pastor Lawrence and Auntie Barbara there with us as well. So again, it's just going to be a great afternoon again for us to just share. And it's just another tool in your box towards building happy and healthy marriages. So hopefully you'll be able to join us.
Can I just say, Dion, that the British Union Conference Evangelism Director has been so impressed about this program coming up on the 1st with both of you, that he has included it into the wider platform of the British Union Conference. So you're going to have people not just in London, but people in Scotland, in Wales, and Ireland who will be joining the platform. So you're going to have a wider audience on Saturday coming. A lot more people, man, from all over the United Kingdom. Great Britain.
Lovely.
We're excited, man.
We're looking forward to the conversation. We're going to be naked. No, we're going to be transparent before everybody. So I think that we'll have a good time as we talk about commitment. Hey, listen, so we have some exciting things to share with you, by the way. We'll have some videos up, and I think there's a video that's going there to kind of promote it as well. Video that my wife and I did. Listen, you need to come. We're going to have a good time, and hopefully all of us will together as we learn a little bit more about being committed and what does it mean. Do we have some people who are living together, and instead of them being in a relationship, instead of them being in love, are they just sharing the same space? We want to talk about that. So you got to be there. You got to be there next week.
All right. Again, thank you so much. All right, we've got Pastor Wade, who's in the wings there. I still think he might be on that 7-8 second delay, but we're just going to turn it over to Pastor Wade as he takes us out this afternoon and this evening and prepares our PRT audience for tomorrow. So, Pastor Wade.
Well, listen, I am just so excited that we had this, though we had some technical difficulties. But I am excited that we are able to still have this conversation. And I was watching the chat, and the chat was lit, as they said. On tomorrow, PRT is on Pastors Roundtable at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. And we are going to be talking about cancel culture. Cancel culture. We have two powerful guests that are going to be with us, and we are excited about the time that we will have. So we look forward. We want to invite you, even those in the UK, join us. I know it's going to be late, but if you enjoy this kind of conversation, come and join us again on tomorrow when we will be talking about cancel culture. Well, we want to say thank you for joining us here at the Pastors
and Real. God bless.
Take care, everybody.
God bless. Thank you.
I guess that relevant resource and real. Thank you.